Millionaire returns home to discover his daughter's incredible plea. "Help me, I can't take it." Jake Reynolds clutched the phone in disbelief, his mind racing as the frantic voice of his daughter, Sarah, echoed in his ears. "Help me, I can't take it." The words reverberated with desperation, digging deeper into the cracks of his carefully constructed life. He was a self-made millionaire, a titan of technology in Silicon Valley, and yet here he was, powerless to shield his child from the storm of abuse brewing back in their small Midwestern hometown. Guilt curled in his stomach like a fist. Despite his successes, he felt like a shadow, haunting his own life, the laughter of his accomplishments dimming in the face of her fear. Returning home felt like stepping onto a battlefield, with each familiar street draped in layers of judgment and resentment. He skimmed over memories of long-forgotten dreams, the echoes of his childhood taunting his accomplishments. Neighborhood whispers cut deeper than any planned investment deal. Jake quickened his pace, grappling with the growing tightness in his chest. He'd left this place, seeking fortune while Sarah faced her own predators alone. Were the sacrifices he'd made worth it if it meant leaving her behind? Though they hadn't spoken in years, Sarah was still the bright girl he remembered, the one who inspired him to chase innovation. Now, she was fighting an invisible enemy, insidious whispers labeling her as the rich girl, as if her father's dreams had turned her into a target. The irony wasn't lost on him. His wealth, intended to open doors, had become a gilded cage for her. He felt small and helpless, scrambling to comprehend the chasm that stretched between him and the daughter who once looked up to him. "You were supposed to calm me down," she had said, voice trembling through the phone. Yet how could he calm her tempest? His privilege made him feel like a traitor in his own skin. Before they could reconnect, he learned the horrifying truth about her school. Bullying sanctioned by a system that traded silence for donations. He felt anger bubbling beneath the surface, yet it battled with an overwhelming unease. How could he, a man of wealth and innovation, face the very officials who had perpetuated this cycle of cruelty? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His mind raced through scenarios. He could confront the school, potentially placing a target on Sarah's back. Or he could retreat, shielding them both from the whirlwind of judgment and alienation that seemed to be waiting. Yet in the depths of his heart, the image of his daughter sitting alone at her lunch table crushed him. "I can't take it!" Her voice crackled, the weight of her uncertainty clenching around his consciousness. What was right? What was just? Jake faced a crossroad, caught between the father he wanted to be and the businessman he had become. Just as he felt a sliver of resolve carving through the confusion, the consequences of his decisions loomed, heavier than the weight of his riches. As he stood outside the school, breath hitching in his throat, he wondered if this was the moment he'd finally lose her, or if it would be the moment he'd reclaim her from the abyss. The echo of Sarah's plea haunted him, and the tension coiled tighter. Would he rise to defend Sarah, exposing the prejudice and suffering she battled? Or would he allow his fears to engulf them both? Trapped in a whirlwind of uncertainty, Jake felt the fray of his heart reverberate one thought. Every second wasted pulled them further apart. Jake stood rooted outside the school, his heart pounding against his ribcage like a caged animal, desperate for release. He could hear the distant sounds of children laughing, oblivious to the turmoil that swirled within him. This was supposed to be a moment of resolution, yet he felt paralyzed by an inner conflict that threatened to consume him. With each breath, the weight of his past mistakes pressed down harder. What had he sacrificed to create a life of luxury? It now felt like he'd only built a prison for his daughter. He clenched his fists, wrestling with the impulse to march inside and demand answers. What was the point of his success if it had not fortified the foundation of their relationship or protected Sarah from hurt? The creeping self-doubt gnawed at him, compelling him to question every move he'd made in pursuit of his career. Had ambition come at the cost of their bond? As he found himself grappling with these thoughts, he recalled the countless hours spent away, building a name for himself while the most important relationship in his life eroded silently. "Time to put the past behind you, Jake," he reminded himself, forcing the words through gritted teeth. It was time to reclaim what was his, not just in terms of wealth, but in love and family. He couldn't afford any more lapses in judgment. As he stepped forward, he resolved to confront the very system that had betrayed him and Sarah. He envisioned the school's administration, faceless figures hiding behind red tape, content in their ignorance, while horrors unfolded in the hallways. Yet this wouldn't be a confrontation born out of rage. It needed to be calculated. He had successfully battled corporate giants before. Dealing with a school board required a different approach. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the doors. The bright fluorescent lights overhead seemed to shine down with a mocking intensity, illuminating the path he had avoided for too long. He gathered himself, recalling the countless pitch meetings with investors where he projected confidence. Here, he needed to channel that same energy for his daughter. "Mr. Reynolds?" A voice pulled him from his thoughts. The principal, a heavy-set man with a sharp suit, peered at him over the rim of his glasses. "What can I do for you today?" Jake's pulse quickened, but he met the man's gaze, leveling his own. "I'm here to discuss the situation my daughter is facing at this school," he said clearly, allowing his frustration to simmer. "I want to understand why this bullying is happening under your watch." The principal blinked, momentarily taken aback. "We take such allegations very seriously," he replied, a sheen of sweat glistening on his brow. "But the school conducts investigations." "No," Jake interjected, determination simmering just beneath his words. "What is being done?" "Because from where I stand, it seems the school is complicit in creating an environment where bullying thrives. This needs to change." The two locked eyes, and for a moment, it felt as though time stood still. Jake could sense the fear radiating from the principal. Maybe it was the uncertainty of confronting a millionaire, but it was more than that. Suddenly, Jake saw a flicker of hope in the man's demeanor, the faintest recognition that this wasn't just about rules and regulations, but lives being shattered. The wheels began to turn in Jake's mind, a plan forming, combining resources and influence to confront the entrenched practices within the school. He would fight for Sarah and every other child caught in this cycle. But just as he prepared to launch into his strategy, a muffled sob broke through from the hallway, dragging him from his thoughts. It was unmistakably Sarah, her voice punctuating the air with an anguish that made his insides twist. Instinctively he turned toward the sound, dread pooling in his chest. This was only the beginning. The battle he'd entered was far from won. Would he be able to protect Sarah and break this cycle? Or would he find himself drowning in the very system he sought to change? With a surge of protective instinct, Jake took a step toward the source of her pain, resolved to face whatever came next. It was now or never. He needed to reclaim hope not just for Sarah, but for himself as well. Yet deep down, a haunting thought lingered. What if the truth buried within the school was darker than he could have ever imagined? Jake rushed down the hallway, his heart racing as he followed the sound of Sarah's distress. He shoved open the door to the girls' restroom, the cacophony of cries and whispers hitting him like a wall. Inside, a cluster of girls froze, their eyes darting between him and Sarah, who was slumped against the sink, tears staining her cheeks. For a moment, the air thickened with tension, the girls retreating into a tangible silence, as if they could sense the storm brewing around him. Jake knelt beside her, his protective father instincts surging while worry kicked him in the gut. "Sarah," he said softly, cradling her trembling shoulders. "What happened? Talk to me." Through gasps, Sarah tried to summon words. It's Maria and her friends. They won't leave me alone. They said if I tell anyone. She choked on her sobs, her small frame shaking violently. Each revelation cut deeper than the last, stripping away Jake's composure. What had he missed? How could he have let her suffer alone? Rage bubbled within him, tempered only by the desperate need to be the father she needed. Sarah, I promise I will fix this, he whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. But right now, we need to get you out of this environment. As he helped her to her feet, something shifted in him. This was not just about protecting his daughter, but about confronting a culture that enabled this kind of behavior to persist. He focused his gaze back on the girls, who now appeared to shrink under his scrutiny. You should be ashamed, he said, and though his tone was restrained, authority seeped through. Bullying is never acceptable. The gravity of those words pulsed in the air, but as he turned back to Sarah, he felt a twinge of doubt. Was he doing the right thing? Dialogue was critical for resolution, yet the anger swelling within him screamed for action. He couldn't ignore the growing unease behind his own protective shield. Was he truly capable of navigating the complicated social landscape these children inhabited? Once outside the restroom, Jake guided Sarah toward the principal's office, where he intended to take drastic measures. He steeled himself for the battle that lay ahead, mentally preparing his arguments while balancing the urgency of Sarah's emotional state. As they reached the office, he caught sight of her reflection in the glass door, her face a mosaic of fear and loyalty, fighting against the fear that threatened to drown her. Inside, the principal was waiting, and Jake wasted no time in laying everything bare. He spoke steadily, punctuating each point with a growing fervor. I am going to hold you accountable for the rampant bullying in this school, but more importantly, I want to work with you to create real change. This isn't just a problem for my daughter, but for all the children affected. What will you do to address this? The principal began to stammer, his hands trembling slightly as he grabbed a pen and notepad. The words hadn't escaped Jake's lips effortlessly. They emerged from the depths of worry and determination that had flooded his psyche since entering the building. It's about time someone did something, Jake stated, anchoring himself in conviction. I have the resources to effect change. I need to know that you'll take this seriously. As they laid plans to address the bullying policy and create an initiative aimed at fostering an inclusive environment, a subtle shift began to emerge in Jake's perspective. Instead of viewing this as a losing battle against an impenetrable system, he recognized the potential to create something meaningful. Could he funnel his corporate skills toward this administrative endeavor? Jake nodded at Sarah, who had cautiously moved closer, the hint of a smile breaking through her clouds of despair. Was he finally making the impact he had long sought to achieve, not just for her, but for countless other children? Yet in the back of his mind, a daunting question remained. Would the school be willing to lay bare the uncomfortable truths lurking beneath its surface? And how far was he prepared to go to ensure that Sarah, and others like her, would never have to walk these hallways in fear again? Determination ignited within him. He had taken the first step, but the fight was just beginning. With each plan drafted, a new layer of complexity unfurled before him. What new alliances or conflicts would emerge as he sought the truth behind this labyrinth of hurt? Jake left the principal's office feeling both exhilarated and unsettled. Each step away from the clutches of bureaucracy felt heavy with responsibility. The principal's nodding approval had provided a temporary boost to his confidence, yet a gnawing anxiety twisted in his gut. Would anyone truly listen? Would they turn a blind eye once the dust settled? He glanced at Sarah, whose eyes had begun to clear, the tension of earlier morphing into a cautious optimism. Could he really create change, or was he just grasping at straws? They exited the school building, and the late afternoon light cast long shadows, mirroring his ambivalence. "Do you think they'll do it, Dad?" Sarah asked, biting her lip. Her innocence tugged at Jake's heartstrings, amplifying the weight of his resolve. Somehow, mere words weren't going to be enough to amend the systemic rot that bred fear among the students. "I think they're finally starting to understand," he replied. Yet he knew the truth. Understanding wasn't enough. Action was paramount. "But we need to keep pushing. We'll follow up regularly." As they climbed into his car, Jake slipped into a contemplative silence. The more he thought of Maria and her friends, the more a plan started to materialize in his mind. What if he organized a forum, not just a meeting, but an event that would involve students, parents, and faculty? A place where concerns could be aired, accountability could be discussed, and solutions could be pursued collectively. "Dad?" Sarah broke through his thoughts, her voice just above a whisper. "Do you think it'll really help?" Jake looked in her direction. "It has to. But it starts with you too, Sarah. We need to equip you and your friends with the tools to stand up for each other, to create a community that doesn't tolerate this fear." A flicker of comprehension flashed in her eyes. "You mean, like, a group? For everyone?" "Exactly," he said, his excitement building with each word. "We can name it something empowering. Maybe a group with a mission to help kids feel safe, supported, and heard." As he drove home, the gears in Jake's mind started to spin faster. He envisioned a gathering where students could share their stories, hope mingling with the chaos of vulnerability. Would they come? Would they risk exposing their struggles? He needed to foster a culture of bravery, where speaking out was celebrated rather than punished. That evening, Jake crafted a rough outline of his plan. He would draft a proposal for the forum, enlisting not just Sarah, but also her trusted friends to serve as peer representatives. Engaging them from the start would ensure they felt ownership over the initiative. He felt invigorated, creating a list of resources, mental health professionals, conflict resolution trainers, anyone who could offer insights to help navigate the emotional terrains these kids were grappling with. Yet an unsettling worry lingered at the edges of his thoughts. The risk of backlash from the bullies or their guardians loomed large. What if this initiative made things worse for Sarah? The question haunted him as he drifted off to sleep, merging his hopes with the ominous shadows around them. Days turned into a blur of meetings, phone calls, and strategic planning. He even found himself reaching out to local organizations focused on anti-bullying initiatives. It felt somewhat foreign to move from the boardroom to a battleground of emotions, but each interaction drew him deeper into a realization that this would redefine his leadership. With time slipping by, he sensed an impending deadline. The school year was rapidly approaching its close, and if things didn't mobilize soon, the urgency of action might dissipate, leaving behind nothing but unanswered pleas. The stakes rose daily. Hidden within each moment was the potential for missteps and revelations. Driven by the urgency to create change, he gathered courage he didn't know he possessed, and prepared to face the school's administration anew. Would they fully embrace the path he was forging, or would fragile walls of tradition guard against his vision? With determination hardening in his chest, Jake realized this was not merely about addressing Sarah's fear. It urged him to confront his own insecurities, to step out of the shadows and reclaim the power that had once belonged to him in the corporate world. As he rehearsed his lines, shaping arguments with precision, he acknowledged a personal transformation was underway, a metamorphosis fueled by love for his daughter and the pursuit of justice for all children. But just as he thought he understood the complexities ahead, one unsettling realization dawned on him. It was time to face Maria and the other aggressors directly in an effort to pave the way for resolution. How would he confront those responsible for the turmoil? And would the very act of standing up inspire real change, or therapy needed to treat vulnerabilities? As the meeting with the school approached, uncertainty tightened its grip, testing how much he was willing to risk to break the cycle of hurt. With the meeting just hours away, Jake's mind raced through potential scenarios, each more daunting than the last. He glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror, an inner battle unfurling within him. Could he truly step beyond his role as a concerned parent and assert himself as a voice for change? The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and yet the stakes had never been higher. As he prepared to enter the school, he felt the weight of responsibility press against his chest. It wasn't just about Sarah's fears. It was about countless students trapped under the thumb of bullying and intimidation. How many other parents had stood here feeling equally helpless? This resolve sparked something anew in Jake. He realized he could no longer remain a passive observer in their lives. Inside the school, the familiar fluorescent lights buzzed, echoing off the walls like a constant reminder of the oppressive atmosphere. Each step toward the administration office felt heavier, yet he clung to the idea that bravery might be contagious. The echoes of students' laughter mingled with the undertones of whispers he knew carried tales of fear and suffering. Arriving at the conference room, Jake found himself facing the assistant principal, the school psychologist, and several teachers. They greeted him with polite nods, but their eyes held a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Was this just another concerned parent or someone willing to challenge the status quo? "Thank you for coming, Jake," said the assistant principal, her tone cautious, yet open. It was the opportunity he had prepared for, but his mouth felt dry, and a flurry of anxious thoughts cascaded through him. Could he articulate the complexities of fear, respect, and accountability? Taking a deep breath, he initiated the discussion, laying out his proposal for an open forum focused on student well-being and the eradication of bullying. "We need to create a safe space for students to voice their concerns. They deserve to be heard, not just listened to briefly." As he spoke, clarity emerged within him, each word reinforcing his purpose. The room fell silent. All eyes locked onto him. He could almost feel the weight of tradition pushing back against his vision, yet he pressed on. No more token gestures. Real change requires us to confront not only the behaviors, but also the systems that allow them to flourish. Confronting their skepticism head-on, he continued, "I know the risks, the backlash that might come from students or even parents. But by avoiding this conversation, we're complicit in the silence that protects bullies. We owe it to our kids to create an environment where they can thrive." For every line he delivered, he could see cracks beginning to form in their hesitance. The school psychologist leaned forward, intrigued. A flicker of understanding passed through the room. Their body language shifted, as if they were weighing the potential of his proposition against the comfort of their established routines. But just as optimism surged within him, doubt clawed back. What if they dismissed his ideas, left him standing alone in his plight? Was he brave enough to withstand any backlash? Could he endure pushback from those who cared more about preserving the status quo than embracing necessary change? Jake's heart raced, and he gulped, trying to push back the rising tide of anxiety. "This isn't just about my daughter," he reiterated. "I'm here for every child who feels unsafe, unheard, or invisible. We have a choice to make, one that defines the legacy we leave behind." As he concluded, silence enveloped the room like a heavy shroud. Jake felt exposed, stripped raw by his own personal stakes and fears, yet there was an undeniable thrill in finally being honest. His struggles were now a part of the larger conversation, a moment where he chose vulnerability over apathy. The assistant principal finally spoke up. "This is a significant request." But before she could complete her thought, the door swung open. In walked Sarah, her face taut with concern. Jake's heart sank as he caught the worried look in her eyes. "Dad, we need to talk. There's something happening right now." The sudden shift threatened to derail everything he had just built. Jake felt a surge of dread wash over him, but he hardened his resolve. It was clear this was no longer just about confronting the school. He would need to uncover new truths, and perhaps even confront the very people who were perpetuating this cycle. What awaited him next might be far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Jake's gut twisted as Sarah stepped into the room, her anxious demeanor contrasting sharply with the somewhat sterile atmosphere filled with bureaucracy. A sense of urgency emanated from the way she clutched her backpack, her eyes darting between him and the school officials, a silent plea for protection and understanding layered within that worried gaze. "Dad," she insisted, her voice just above a whisper. "It's about the kids, the ones who've been bothering me." Each word felt heavy, not just with the gravity of her claim, but with the implications of what this could mean for their fight against bullying. Jake's mind raced as he absorbed her words, half listening to the assistant principal's attempts to regain control over the meeting. Was she referring to recent incidents or something more systemic? Sarah's expression revealed a swirling tempest of fear. He needed to center himself, refocus. "You can tell me," he encouraged her softly, cutting through the meeting's formalities. The room watched, tension palpable. Finally, Sarah exhaled sharply, words tumbling out in a flood. "There's a group. They've been targeting a friend of mine, and yesterday I saw one of them throw a drink at her. They laughed, and it was horrible, Dad." Her voice trembled, frustration mingling with vulnerability. "I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. What if I become their next target?" A knot formed in Jake's chest, an instinctual, swift reaction ignited within him. "We need to talk about this. Right now," he said firmly, casting a glance at the educators whose faces reflected shock and discomfort. The assistant principal opened her mouth to speak, but Jake didn't wait for permission. "We're not leaving here until we address Sarah's concerns. This is exactly what I'm afraid of when it comes to student safety and well-being." His demand resonated with a courage he didn't know he possessed, deflecting attention away from lingering self-doubt. "Maybe we should schedule a meeting where we can discuss this further," offered the school psychologist hesitantly, clearly taken aback by Jake's sudden assertiveness. "No, we need to do this now," he countered, insisting on the immediacy of the situation. "We cannot allow fear to dictate how we handle this. Sarah deserves to feel safe in this school." His words hung heavy in the air, a challenge to the status quo that had, for too long, accepted silence over vulnerability. To his surprise, the assistant principal nodded. "All right, Sarah. Please tell us everything you've experienced." As Sarah recounted the instances of harassment, snickers in the hall, whispers directed at her friend, the isolation, it was as though her words took physical form, wrapping around them with a tightening grip of truth. Each detail painted a clearer picture of the toxic environment that so many students navigated daily. Jake felt the pulse of his conviction quicken. This was no longer just about him or Sarah. This was a call to arms against a formidable adversary, the culture of bullying that cloaked the school. He gripped the edge of the table, heart thumping as he envisioned every frightened child who felt the same way as Sarah and her friend. "But Dad," Sarah's voice quivered, "what if they come after me for speaking up?" Jake's heart sank, the reality of their situation crashing over him like a wave. This risk was not just abstract, it was real and imminent. "Then we'll make sure you're not alone," he reassured her, though in the back of his mind, a nagging doubt stirred. Was he strong enough to shield her from the fallout? To protect her spirit from the cruelty of others? This was no longer a mere proposal for change. It was the beginning of a fight, one that would test his resolve and redefine their definition of safety. As he prepared to step deeper into this fray, Jake braced himself for the challenges ahead, seeing clearly that confronting the bullies would only be part of the battle. What if the bullying ran deeper than he could ever imagine? Jake felt the weight of impending revelations pressing down on him like a storm cloud ready to burst. The next steps they would take wouldn't just alter his relationship with Sarah, but might also unravel layers of complicity within the school, ones that some were desperately trying to keep hidden. Jake left the meeting, weighed down by a swirl of uncertainty and anger. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, mirroring the disarray of his thoughts. How had he reached the point where he felt compelled to defend not just his daughter, but all the invisible children suffering under the thumb of bullying? The initial rush of bravery now simmered into a persistent anxiety. The very notion that they were confronting a pervasive culture made his skin crawl. In the car, the silence was thick, punctuated only by the hum of the engine. He cast occasional glances at Sarah, who stared out the window, lost in a world of her own thoughts. The question remained lodged in his mind. How could he ensure her safety without provoking the very targets of her fear? "Sarah," he ventured quietly, breaking the silence. "I'm proud of you for speaking up, but I also want to make sure we approach this the right way." He felt the weight of her discomfort, her apprehension carved into the tilt of her shoulders. "I don't want to be a target, Dad," she replied, barely glancing away from the descending buildings on the street. "It's not just what they do. It's how they make everyone else feel about me. I hate that it's happening to me and my friends." Her words struck a nerve. He was grappling with the very ideas he had dismissed as abstract. Social power dynamics, the invisible chains that bound the timid to the silence of their fears. They weren't just words for him anymore. They shaped a reality he had to confront alongside Sarah. "I think it's important we talk to some of your friends," Jake suggested, recognizing a glimmer of an idea. "If we can gather stories, experiences, more people can voice how this culture has affected them. The more tangible the evidence we present, the harder it will be for the school to ignore us." Sarah turned toward him, a flicker of hope illuminating her features momentarily. "But what if they find out? What if they retaliate and make it worse for everyone involved?" The shadows of doubt danced in her eyes, and Jake felt a prick of anxiety. She had a point. The stakes were real. "We'll approach this carefully, together," he reassured her, determination lacing his tone. Could they even trust the school to protect them? Jake wrestled with his internal conflicts. What did it mean to champion a cause that could open them to further scrutiny and retaliation? He couldn't ignore the growing fissure in his heart, questioning his ability to provide safety for his daughter. As they arrived home, Jake faced a new decision. He could choose to let this evolve organically, avoid deeper involvement and risk losing their momentum. Or he could embrace this raw point of vulnerability and act on it strategically. Standing in the hallway, watching Sarah unload her backpack, he spotted her journal. A sudden thought struck him. What if she had been documenting her experiences? It might serve as the backbone of their approach. "What if we took a look through your journal?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Sarah hesitated, glancing toward the closed door of her room with a mix of reluctance and anxiety. "I guess it could help," she finally said, though a trace of hesitation lingered in her voice. The words hung between them, a precursor to what lay ahead. They were now not only allies, but partners in a battle that demanded an avalanche of truth. "Let's get started then," he said, his resolve hardening into solid determination. How many others would join them? Faced with the stirring realization that they were on the brink of uncovering deeper truths surrounding the bullying culture, Jake gathered his strength. Just as he reached for the journal, a comment from Sarah nudged him back into reality. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Jake paused, an uneasy knot tightening in his stomach. The truth seemed more daunting than anticipated. "We will make them believe. We have to." His heart pounded as clarity surged. Between confronting the bullies and challenging the very foundation of complacency, the path back would not be easy. The moment of standing up was a moment of peeling back layers. What exposure might they find lurking in her words? The raw, unfiltered truth that lay deep within those pages. He inhaled slowly, a mix of fear and eagerness coiling in his gut as they prepared to dive into the dark corners of Sarah's experiences, unearthing the painful secrets that had lingered for too long. In that daunting quietness, Jake felt a new resolve take shape. Perhaps now they would unearth truths not only about the bullies, but about themselves, strengths and vulnerabilities they never expected to discover. The next step wasn't just about fighting back. It was about knowing how to equip themselves for the fight ahead. Jake held the journal in his hands, feeling its weight as if it contained not just pages of written thoughts, but the very essence of Sarah's struggles. The soft cover was worn, an indication of how often it had been opened and closed, each time perhaps releasing some pent-up emotional tide. He took a breath, aware that the moment he opened the book was the moment he was inviting both hope and heartache into their lives in a far more intimate way. "Maybe we can start by just looking at the most recent entries," he suggested, trying to inject a sense of calm into the atmosphere. Sarah nodded, though her eyes reflected a storm of emotions. Fear about the revelations and the unknown. As he flipped to the first page, each sentence echoed with a poignant vulnerability that tore at Jake's heart. A stark reminder of the battles she felt compelled to fight alone. The words contained a mixture of sadness and determination, and with each paragraph, he sensed how deeply his daughter was impacted. Frustration trailed through her prose, punctuated by moments of disbelief and anger towards the actions of her peers. The bravery she had shown in speaking up began to reveal itself in the ink that danced across the pages. "Can you believe this, Dad?" she whispered, so close to her own thoughts that they felt sacred. "This is what I live with every day." Yet, through anguish, there was also empowerment. Sarah's writing reflected a strong desire for change, birthing a tiny voice within her that longed to wield the power of her own narrative. Jake felt a powerful surge of protective instincts. "These are powerful stories," he said, locking eyes with her. "We need to honor them. This isn't just about what you're going through. It's about all those kids who feel invisible, just like you do." A flicker of fear crossed Sarah's features, and she glanced away. "But what if it puts a bigger target on my back?" The reality of her question reverberated through the silence of the room. He knew she was right. The stakes were exceedingly high, and the thought of retaliation from the bullies loomed large. Jake felt the familiar pang of anxiety, but deep down, something simmered. A newfound resolve. "Sarah," he said carefully, "what if we took your stories and turned them into something bigger? What if we presented them to the school as testimonies? This isn't just about you. It's about making it safer for everyone." "What if nobody cares?" she replied, her voice a blend of fear and disbelief. "What if they dismiss us?" "They won't," he countered, the conviction in his voice echoing his transformative realization. "They can't hide anymore. Your experiences validate this whole issue. The more stories we compile, the harder it will be for them to ignore us." Jake's mind began churning, strategizing how to present this latest discovery. They would have to tread cautiously, but also decisively. Perhaps a small, private gathering with some of Sarah's closest friends. Their united voices might create a ripple effect that could no longer be dismissed. As the tension began to subside, he reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We're in this together, Sarah, but we can't do it alone. We should start thinking about how to reach out to your friends, finding a safe way to collect their experiences." The looming uncertainty still clung to them, each decision laden with implication, but there was a refreshing optimism in the air, a sense of agency that had been missing moments before. In that moment, Jake could visualize a path that emerged from the shadows, the potential of collective stories becoming a beacon of hope. Just as Sarah nodded, commitment strengthening in her expression, a thought crossed Jake's mind. What if the school didn't just disregard their efforts? What if they decided to retaliate, or worse, what if they tried to silence Sarah? Just the notion was enough to fuel a fire in his gut. "Are you ready for this, Sarah? Can you handle the possibility that we might stir things up even more?" She looked ponderous, the weight of the world reflected in her eyes. "I think so, but only if you're right there with me." The familiar swirl of emotions bubbled up, blending fear with excitement, as Jake realized this was more than just about confronting bullies. It was about transforming both of their lives, creating a new version of themselves, one that could potentially lead them to unexpected discoveries about their own strength. He exhaled slowly, determination coiling in his gut once more as the horizon of their fight began to spread before them like the dawn. Then let's begin. Together. Though unease lingered in the air, a crack of illumination hinted at what lay ahead. The journey was just beginning, one that would not only challenge them, but reveal untapped resources within. The uncertainty around them would, inevitably, coax forth unexpected possibilities. As they embraced this new path, an unbidden question filled Jake's mind, reigniting the tension in his spirit. Was he truly ready to face the school authorities, or were they stepping into territory beyond their control? The stakes were higher than ever, and the moment of truth loomed closer than he had anticipated. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting slanted rays across the room. Jake sat at the kitchen table, the journal still open in front of him, the words haunting him like a distant echo. The residue of their conversation lingered, fueling both his determination and anxiety. As the coffee brewed, he considered their next steps carefully, the gravity of the task ahead weighing heavily on his shoulders. He took a deep breath, knowing that this wasn't just a matter of addressing bullying. It was about giving Sarah's pain a voice. Each word in that journal revealed a layer of her struggle. He found himself contemplating the myriad of emotions coursing through her: fear, anger, but also courage. Could they transition this magnitude of vulnerability into actionable change? As Jake sipped his coffee, he began drafting a plan in his mind. First, he would reach out to Sarah's closest friends, ones he knew she trusted. They needed a strong support system. The thought of arranging a gathering made him both hopeful and anxious. Each phone call would be a step further into uncharted territory. What if some friends didn't feel comfortable sharing their stories? The possibility nagged at him, but he pushed it aside. No one was alone in this. Pulling out his phone, he quickly composed a message to Michaela, Sarah's best friend. "Hey, can you come over this week? I'd like to talk to you about something important regarding school." Sent. With that, he felt a small surge of satisfaction, but it began to dissipate as he remembered he needed to reach out to others too. Next, Jake thought about the school administration. It felt like stepping onto a battlefield. What if they dismissed Sarah's stories? What if, instead of taking action, they chose to protect their own reputation? That lingering uncertainty gnawed at him, filling him with urgency. The last thing he wanted was for Sarah's bravery to be met with indifference or hostility. Taking another sip of coffee, he noticed his hands tremble slightly. It was a stark reminder of how important this was, not just for Sarah, but for so many kids who felt unseen. Each flicker of doubt caused him to reconsider. What was he hoping to achieve? Was it truly about beginning a dialogue, or was it a desperate plea to protect his daughter while challenging the very fabric of the school's ecosystem? Jake put his cup down, focusing on the clutter of paperwork scattered across the table. Bills, junk mail, but also his business proposals. What if he could channel his professional skills into this venture? He had spent years presenting corporate pitches, finding ways to navigate treacherous waters. Perhaps he could draft an actual formal presentation that combined Sarah's stories with statistical evidence about bullying and its effects on mental health. The spark of an idea lit up in his mind. He could invite local mental health professionals to be part of this conversation at the school. Their expertise could provide necessary weight to Sarah's voice, helping protect her from retaliation. It would create an environment where the narratives mattered and would not be dismissed as mere complaints. Just then, a light knock on the door roused him from his thoughts. It was Sarah, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What are you working on?" He hesitated before deciding to be completely honest. "Planning our next steps. Would you be willing to help expand the idea into something bigger?" She stepped inside, visibly intrigued, and took a seat across from him. "What do you mean?" Jake outlined his vision, watching her expression shift from confusion to realization. "We should present your stories, have professionals involved. Make it more than just us against them. Sarah regarded him for a moment, her brow furrowed in contemplation. Do you really think that could work? A soft haze of apprehension settled in Jake's chest. I believe it could, but it's going to require more strength from both of us. There was a fierce determination in Sarah's gaze as she nodded slowly, her earlier trepidation seemingly dissipating. Okay, I'm in. But Dad, if it doesn't go the way we hope? Jake inhaled deeply, preparing himself for the inevitable crossroads they would face. Then we adapt. We have to be ready for anything. The weight of their commitment loomed, yet something inside him brightened, stoking a flicker of hope. They were stepping into a storm, but together, they would navigate its fury. Let's start outlining what we want to share, Jake suggested, the urgency blending with an exhilarating thrill of purpose. Their journey was just beginning, and he could feel the push of change drawing closer. As they leaned over the table, sketching ideas between them, a thought trailed through Jake's mind, echoing with newfound intensity. What unexpected allies might they uncover in this pursuit? The question hung in the air, fueling his resolve as they moved forward into the unknown. Jake Reynolds emerged from the shadows of his past, emerging stronger than he had ever thought possible. The confrontation with the school administration had marked a pivotal moment in his life, a transformation catalyzed by his determination to defend Sarah against the societal wrongs that had haunted her. Weeks had passed since he first stepped into that conference room, a man alone but now fortified by a unified front. With each gathering of Sarah's friends, they collected a trove of powerful testimonies, all threaded together by a shared nightmare of bullying. He transformed Sarah's journal into a compelling narrative, positioning these stories as invasive truths that could no longer be ignored. One evening, as they prepared for their first forum, Jake felt a rising sense of pride. He understood that raising awareness was merely the first step. Real change required sustained action. Their plan wasn't just to air grievances. It was a call for systemic reform, a promise to protect every child facing similar challenges. Dad, do you think anyone will even show up? Sarah asked, her nervousness palpable. With a steady gaze, Jake replied, This isn't just about you anymore. You're not alone anymore, and people are ready to listen. Those words ignited a spark in Sarah. She had grown accustomed to being voiceless, and now she was poised to reclaim her agency. As the night of the forum arrived, the school's auditorium buzzed with an unexpected energy. Parents, students, and faculty gathered, each holding their breaths in anticipation. Jake's heart raced as he stepped onto the stage, empowered by the faces that filled the seats. No longer just a businessman, he was a father on a mission, a voice amplified by urgency and resolve. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice steady but warm. We are here because our children deserve better. As he laid out the facts, data he'd meticulously gathered on the effects of bullying and the harrowing statistics of silence, he could feel the air shift. Every story shared by Sarah and her friends resonated deeply with the audience. They exposed the hell they'd been enduring, vulnerability conflicting beautifully with resilience. The ovation at the end was thunderous, a collective acknowledgement of their plight. But even as applause echoed around him, Jake knew this was just the beginning. A few days later, the principal reached out with an unexpected request. We need to discuss an action plan moving forward, she said, sincerity lacing her tone. The shift in perspective, a recognition that change was necessary, filled Jake with cautious optimism. They were preparing to challenge the systemic norms that had long allowed bullying to fester. Later, Jake shared the news with Sarah, who beamed with pride. You did it, Dad. You really made them listen. No, we did it, Sarah. You and your friends taught me that, Jake replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, the bond between them now solidified. As their initiative rolled out, workshops, mental health support systems, and anti-bullying policies, Jake felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. The journey had forged something unbreakable between him and Sarah. Mutual respect, understanding, and unwavering support. The father who once felt distant had transformed into an ally, an advocate, one willing to fight alongside his daughter. The final piece of recognition came when the school honored their work at a special ceremony. Jake stood proudly by Sarah's side as the principal announced the creation of an annual Unity Day, promoting safety and inclusion in their school. In that moment, Jake Reynolds felt an overwhelming surge of accomplishment. He had not only reclaimed his daughter, but had also rediscovered his purpose. No longer content in the corridors of wealth, he was now a champion for the vulnerable, a voice for the silenced. The last chapter of his life did not end with riches or success alone. It culminated in meaningful change that resonated well beyond their small hometown. As they left the ceremony, a shared smile reflected in the sun-soaked streets. Jake finally felt at peace, profoundly confident in his position as a father, an advocate, and a man who had achieved true fulfillment. As they walked home hand in hand, he understood this truth. Changes like these begin with one voice, but they echo in the hearts of many. You need to subscribe now to ensure you never miss these powerful stories of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep this momentum going. Comment below your reactions and theories. Your voices matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and become part of this incredible journey. Don't wait even one more second. Let's inspire change together.